Before you dive in, imagine discovering a secret so shocking it could cost a billionaire everything. That's what you're about to feel in this story. If you love intense drama, emotional twists, powerful characters, and endings that stun you, then hit subscribe right now because stories like this are dropping every day, and you don't want to miss a single one, especially when they take unexpected turns like this. The world had always known the Brantford name as a symbol of steel, power, and unstoppable ascent, but no one knew what secrets were buried inside the mansion that sat on the hill overlooking Lake Sinclair, secrets that would begin to unravel the very moment the millionaire's son Elijah Brantford started fading away in a way no doctor, no therapist, no specialist, and no high-priced expert could understand, and the entire nightmare would only start making sense when a quiet, observant maid with a past of her own decided to do the unthinkable, risking everything, including her life, to save a boy who wasn't blood to her but somehow felt more connected to her heart than anyone had in years. And as this story unfolds across 3 hidden chapters buried inside one unstoppable wave of truth, pain, and revelation, everything you think you know about wealth, trust, betrayal, and the cost of family will twist into something else entirely as we begin in what we will call Chapter 1, even though there are no breaks here. No pauses, no room to breathe, because Elijah Brantford hadn't always been the ghost-like figure that haunted the hallways of the mansion. Once he had been vibrant, full of life, a kid who ran across the lawns laughing with the kind of recklessness only children of privilege possess, but all of that changed on the night of his 13th birthday, the night a storm hit the lake like a beast from another world, and his mother, Lila Brantford, disappeared without a trace, leaving behind nothing except a shattered family, a broken boy, and a shadow so thick over the mansion that even the sunlight seemed dimmer afterward, and Mr. Brantford, Harlan Brantford, steel tycoon, feared negotiator, and the kind of man who could silence a room just by lifting an eyebrow, shut down emotionally, burying himself in work while Elijah slowly withered in the empty spaces of the home like a plant deprived of light. But doctors kept insisting it was psychological, a silent grief, a trauma response, though none of their pills or plans or programs made any difference because Elijah wasn't just sad. He was disappearing, losing weight, losing color, losing presence, as if something were draining him from the inside out. And that was when Sophia entered the mansion, a maid hired by the house's longtime manager Mrs. Keaton, who insisted the Brantfords needed fresh hands and clean eyes, and Sophia, with her soft voice, steady hands, and carefully controlled expressions, seemed like the perfect fit, though no one knew anything about her past except that she needed the job and had an uncanny ability to notice things others overlooked, which became more evident on her first day when she saw Elijah sitting in the grand library staring out the window at nothing, his skin pale, his posture slumped, and something about the boy tugged at her chest with a force she didn't understand, but she greeted him anyway, gently, respectfully, and he blinked at her as if waking from a dream and whispered, "Can you hear it too?" Though she didn't know what he meant, not yet, and the days went on with Sophia cleaning, observing, and quietly noticing the strange patterns in the house. The way certain locked rooms seemed recently disturbed though no one went in them, the way Mrs. Keaton always looked nervous near the West Wing, the way Elijah's condition worsened each time his father returned from business trips, and the way the entire staff avoided discussing anything remotely connected to Lila Brantford because the last person who asked too many questions had been fired overnight. But Sophia wasn't just any maid. She had come to the mansion for a reason she hadn't told anyone, carrying her own secrets, her own ghosts, though she didn't expect those ghosts to collide with the family's in a way that would force her into a role she never imagined she'd play as Elijah slipped further and further away, barely eating, barely sleeping, and occasionally muttering about whispers, shadows, and someone calling his name from inside the walls, which the staff dismissed as grief hallucinations until Sophia heard something one night while collecting laundry near the west hallway. A faint humming, like a lullaby, the kind a mother would sing to a child, and it chilled her spine because it wasn't coming from a person. It was coming from behind the wall itself, and Chapter 2 begins right inside this same relentless river of words as Sophia decides to investigate even though she knows the risk, creeping down hallways forbidden to staff, following the faint hum until she reaches a locked door that no one ever mentioned, a door with fresh scratches near the knob as if someone had tried to get out rather than in. But before she could move closer, footsteps approached, and she ducked into a storage closet just as Harlan Brantford appeared, standing in front of the door with an expression so strained, so grief-ravaged, it shook her because it was the first time she'd ever seen him look human, vulnerable, and he reached for the knob with a trembling hand before pulling away and whispering, "Not yet," then walking off, leaving Sophia breathless in the closet with one thought pounding in her mind. What the hell was behind that door? And she didn't want to care, didn't want to get involved, but Elijah's condition worsened the next morning. He fainted while trying to stand, and Sophia caught him, realizing with horror how feather-light he had become, like there was nothing inside him holding him up, and when she asked him softly what was happening to him, he looked at her with hollow eyes and said, "She wants me with her," pointing toward the west wing, toward the locked door, and Sophia's heart pounded because now there was no doubt something unnatural was happening here, something beyond grief or psychology, so she made a reckless decision, to stay awake that night, hiding near the west hallway to see what or who would come, and around 2:13 a.m., Elijah rose from his bed like a sleepwalker, moving silently through the hallways as if guided by an invisible thread, and she followed him as quietly as she could until he stopped in front of the locked door, reaching for the knob, whispering, "Mom." And the lock clicked open by itself, making Sophia gasp, but before Elijah could step inside, Sophia grabbed him, pulling him back just as a freezing gust of air blew from the crack in the door carrying the scent of the lake, wet, cold, impossible, and the door slammed shut with a violent force that shook dust from the ceiling, waking half the staff, and Mrs. Keegan came running, pale as chalk, hissing at Sophia, "You must never bring him here." Before dragging Elijah away and demanding Sophia forget what she saw, but Sophia couldn't forget. She knew something was horrifically wrong and that Elijah was being pulled towards something he might not survive, so she confronted Mrs. Keegan later that day, demanding answers, but the older woman only said, "The dead try to take what they miss most," cryptic words that haunted Sophia until she pieced together something terrifying. Lila Brantford's body had never been found in the storm the night she vanished wasn't a normal storm, not for Elijah, because he was there. He saw something he never spoke of, something that had been eating him alive for years, pulling him toward death like a tide that wouldn't let him go, and Sophia realized the only person who might know the truth was Harlan Brantford, so she confronted him too, expecting him to fire her, but instead he broke, collapsing into a chair, revealing that Lila had not simply vanished. She had drowned herself in the lake after a devastating argument with him, but her body was swept under the mansion's old foundation tunnels built decades ago for storm drainage, and her spirit, restless and guilt-twisted, had been haunting the house ever since, calling Elijah, pulling him, draining him, because he had been the last person she tried to save during the storm, dragging him toward the boathouse before the waves took her, and Elijah blamed himself, believing his mother died trying to protect him when really, as Harlan whispered in agony, "She died running from me," after he threatened to send her away to a psychiatric facility, a secret he had kept buried out of pride and shame, a secret that had grown teeth over the years, feeding on Elijah's guilt, turning into a spectral force that refused to let the boy go, and Sophia, trembling but resolute, realized the truth. Elijah wasn't fading because of grief, he was fading because his mother's ghost was siphoning him, trying to pull him into the afterlife to keep him with her. And if nothing was done, Elijah would die, vanish, or worse, become trapped somewhere between life and death. So chapter 3 begins when Sophia, refusing to lose another person to darkness like she once lost her own brother in circumstances she rarely spoke of, decides to do the unthinkable. She breaks into the old foundation tunnels beneath the mansion armed only with a flashlight, a rosary, and a desperate determination to confront whatever was calling Elijah, crawling through narrow passages filled with dripping water, decaying wood, and the echo of distant whispers that made her skin crawl, and the deeper she went, the colder it became until her breath fogged the air and her flashlight flickered as if something unseen was draining its power, and then she saw her, a figure hovering above the waterlogged ground, hair floating as if underwater, eyes hollow yet burning with longing, the ghost of Lila Brantford reaching out toward Sophia, whispering, "Bring him to me," a voice layered with sorrow and madness, and Sophia, terrified but unmoving, said, "You're killing him," but the ghost only wailed, mourning, insisting she needed Elijah, that she couldn't be alone in the darkness, and Sophia did something reckless. She stepped closer and said the words that hurt Lila more than anything, "You're keeping him from healing, from living, from becoming the man you wanted him to be," and the ghost shrieked, shaking the tunnels, causing old beams to crack overhead, and water surged up around Sophia's ankles as if the lake itself wanted to swallow her. But she refused to run, raising the rosary and shouting, "If you love him, let him live." And the moment she said it, a blinding burst of light exploded from the rosary as if something divine intervened, illuminating Lila's ghost in a painful glow, making her scream and dissolve into a cascade of shimmering particles that finally, after all those agonizing years, drifted upward and vanished, freeing Elijah's soul at last, and Sophia collapsed, unconscious, until Harlan Brantford and several staff members found her hours later after following the sound of the collapsing beams, and they carried her out just as the tunnels flooded completely, sealing the past forever, and when Sophia awoke, Elijah was sitting beside her, his cheeks full of color, his eyes bright for the first time in years, whispering, "I feel light," and Harlan, overwhelmed, thanked Sophia with genuine humility, promising her anything she wanted: money, house, freedom, but Sophia, with tears in her eyes, said the only thing she wanted was to stay until Elijah was fully healed, something Harlan granted without hesitation, and in the days that followed, the mansion transformed from a place of shadows into one of quiet peace. With Elijah growing stronger, Harlan slowly learning how to be a father instead of a cold, distant figure, and Sophia becoming the heart of the home, the anchor that kept them connected to life, until one evening Elijah said, "I don't think you were sent here by accident," and Sophia smiled, knowing deep down that maybe, just maybe, saving him had saved her too, and though no one outside the mansion ever learned the truth of what happened in those tunnels, the Brantfords never forgot, and they never allowed the shadows of the past to consume them again because the millionaire's son had been fading away until the maid did the unthinkable, choosing courage over fear, love over duty, and life over the cold whisper of the dead, and that choice changed everything forever.